I'd now like to introduce our first speaker, representing Carolina Core, Interim President of the Chatham Economic Development Corporation, Alyssa Byrd.
First, as a millennial, I would like to get a picture to share on the Instagram. As many of you in this room know, economic development is highly competitive. We compete for jobs and investment with other countries, with other states, and sometimes we compete with our neighbors. In addition to being competitive, economic development is highly confidential. We do not talk about our projects, ever. So I want to tell you about a project. It was a big one. It was everything we wanted. A company with a household name, big jobs, big investment, and we had a real chance. In our community that had seen so much loss in the recession, with nearly 20% unemployment, we had a chance to deliver big results that could change lives. And we had competition. Alabama, South Carolina, a community 11 miles down the road. So, what did we do? We put up our silos and we competed. I'll skip the next 6 months and spoil the story. We competed with each other, and we both lost. We had a problem. Competing in isolation wasn't working. We were trying to accomplish the same goals, and we weren't helping each other. So we knew something had to change. Thanks to some creativity and strong regional leadership, Carolina Core was created. Carolina Core is a collaborative project to brand and market a central region in North Carolina. The region is made up of 17 urban and rural counties, as you can see, and we work together to promote ourselves and leverage each other's assets for economic development. Now, regional marketing isn't a new idea in economic development, but Carolina Core has given us a new way to think about how we compete. Carolina Core erases the traditional boundaries and focuses on winning jobs and expansions together as a region. Carolina Core positions our cumulative assets in transportation, education, workforce, and so much more to have a bigger impact, because we believe that a win for one is a win for all. And when we support each other's efforts, we can create a domino effect. Carolina Core has enabled better communication and stronger support within the region. We still compete for projects, and sometimes with our neighbors for the exact same project, but we're doing it as partners. I'm there to back up my neighbors when they need me, and they're there to back me up, because I don't win projects alone. We win projects together. And winning a project means people have a new path to prosperity that wasn't there before, whether rural or urban. So, working in our silos just doesn't work. Because as individuals, we have limited capacity and we have limited resources. But together, we can have a bigger impact and we can be globally competitive. Together, we are Carolina Core, and we're going to change North Carolina. Could I get the Carolina Core folks to stand up? Thank you.
Representing Growing Outdoors, please welcome the project manager for Growing Outdoors at Mountain BizWorks and president of Emergent Opportunities Incorporated, Noah Wilson.
So I'm here to tell you a story of a conflict over 100 years old between tourism and industrial development in the mountains of western North Carolina. In the late 1800s, people flocked from all over the country, from cities, fleeing overcrowding, pollution, and disease, to the mountains for cool waters, lush forests, and especially clean, pure, healing mountain air. And as they went to and fro, and the tracks were built to carry them, those tracks also brought out resources, timber and herbs, ores and minerals, and they brought industrial development to the region. And unfortunately, the industrialists of that time were not so enlightened. They dumped chemicals and waste into those cool waters. They cut down lush forests, and unfortunately, they polluted that crisp, clean, healing air. And so that seeds of conflict were sown, and it was almost inevitable. But about 5 years ago, something happened. People started working together and breaking down those barriers. 3 groups formed. The Outdoor Gear Builders of Western North Carolina, a cooperative of over 30 manufacturers for whom the outdoors was both playground and testing ground. Companies who recognized that they needed a healthy environment to thrive. And they're thriving. In their 2018 census, they found that employment among their members had grown 40% in the last 2 years. Meanwhile, the Nantahala-Pisgah Forest Partnership was forming up. Nonprofits, government agencies, businesses, all working together on the 20-year plan for the national forests, recognizing that while they had fought for territory for decades, even centuries, there were ways forward together. That indeed you could properly harvest a forest and create habitat for grouse and turkey and deer. You could build the forest road properly to protect trout habitat and make a new path for mountain bikers, hikers, horsemen. All the while, the Mountain West Partnership was growing. 7 rival counties whose Friday night football fights were legendary and whose economic development fights were not much less so. But again, as they were fighting among one another, they were losing a global game. And they recognized they were needing to grow together, especially around outdoor industry, because they had beautiful places they weren't capitalizing on. And together, each one of them found something radical. The middle. They recognized that, in fact, you can have livelihoods today, but a legacy for your children you can be proud of. That it's not an either-or proposition between industrial development and tourism, it's an and. We can have a strong economy and a healthy environment in a place-based way. And this is a model that is needed not only in the Appalachian Mountains, but across our state and our country, and we are building that model through the Growing Outdoors Partnership. Now, this is far too complicated to explain in a few minutes here up on stage, but I would love to talk with you about it later. You can go online, outdoorswnc.com, to find out more information. But I want to leave you with something before I do that. Look for that historic conflict in your communities. Find that radical middle. Walk that path together, even indeed, especially with your competitors, because as we're seeing, this is not simply a local game. We have to think bigger than ourselves, and there are opportunities when we step back for greater good and greater impact. And so, thank you for hearing me today. Thank you for supporting all these groups. Thank you to Appalachian Regional Commission for your support of our project. We look forward to working together.
Representing Project Empathy, please welcome recently retired Planning, Economic, and Community Development Director in Transylvania County, Mark Burrows.
And spiritual condition of knowing that the place is shared and that the people who share the place define and limit the possibilities of each other's lives. It is the knowledge that people have of each other, their concern for each other, their trust in each other, the freedom with which they come and go among themselves. Wendell Berry. In the beginning, Project Empathy is the result of several local and even national events. In 2016, the County Planning Board, at the request of the commissioners, began work on a comprehensive plan. Had over 30 different meetings throughout the county. It surveyed over 2,000 individuals. And one of the biggest topics that was discussed was that of, and something already mentioned today, equity. We're not treated fairly. We live in the rural area of this county. We have to go to Brevard. We have to do this. We're not being treated equally. The conversation then led to one of empathy. How do you begin to listen to one another to have an understanding of equity? Racial incident in the Brevard High School brought the U.S. Department of Justice to the county, looking and saying, how can we improve this community? There was the abandonment of the Human Relations Council by both the city and the county. And there was a presidential election. And in fact, as the idea of Project Empathy began, many of my conservative and liberal-leaning friends suggested that an effort could be a way, an effort and empathy could be a way to help bring together different groups, to help strengthen our community. Project Empathy, we are volunteers representing many different organizations and communities. The school system, charter school, the city of Brevard, the sheriff, the police chief, NAACP, the Family Coalition, Family Center, the Rainbow Coalition, churches, El Centro, Sharing House, Brevard College, Brevard Music Center. What we are not a government-sponsored organization. In fact, we are not even a 501c3. We are a group of volunteers, 40-plus strong, trying to make our community better. Our work, bringing together elected and community leaders to discuss the other, engaging, convening the greater community in civic discussion on topics related to health, racial justice, guns. We had a time to talk about guns, and it was not an argument, but a discussion, a civic discussion of where do you come from on this topic. More recently, we've engaged high school kids trying to figure out what do they see as a way to move Transylvania, Brevard, and Rosman forward. Current projects include hosting a time to talk about bikes, much like our time to talk about guns, evaluating something called the Green Dot program out of Kentucky, looking at how do you reduce bullyism in schools, and learning more about this great opportunity that NC State and the IEI staff and board have provided. In closing, a confession. As a longtime trail runner, it's only taken me 50 years to learn how to correctly tie my shoelace. Something that my wife likes to remind me that she told me. The simple act of tying shoes so they don't come undone for a long run is to tie a double knot. Pretty simple. Halfway through a run, it comes undone still. Scientists have actually worked, and they have now shown that if you take the second loop and you tie it in the reverse direction and then pull, that knot will hold. Much to the dissatisfaction of my lungs, it does. By simply reversing the direction of the second loop, you provide a much more resilient knot that is less likely to pull loose. By embracing something as simple as empathy and convening different groups and people, we create a more stable community, rural and urban, that ultimately supports greater trust, compassion, health, and perhaps even longer-lasting economic prosperity. On behalf of the Transylvania Project Empathy team, thank you very much.
Please welcome the principal and founder of Community Food Lab, Erin White.
So imagine that you're in high school in a small town, and you get a text towards the end of the day that says, come home right after school. It's a little bit strange, but you don't think it's that big a deal. You get home, and everybody's car is in the driveway. Your whole family is there. And as you're walking up the steps to the farmhouse porch, it's quiet. and you're still wondering, like, what's up? You walk into the kitchen, everybody's there. As you sit down, your father stands up, and you can tell that there's a lot on his mind. And he says to your mom, as you're sitting down, he says, you know, your granddad would have figured this out. And she says back to him, nobody could have figured this out, just tell him. And he says, we have to sell the farm. Your head starts spinning. Will you lose your friends? Do you have to move away? What does it mean for you as a kid? The words still hang in the air in the kitchen. We have to sell the farm. And what does that mean for your whole family and for your community that you live in? And what does it mean for the land? What happens to that? And so a question for us is, in North Carolina, what do we lose when we lose a farm? And it's questions like that we try to ask as often as we can, because they lead us to big conversations about the future, and they help us see how single events actually can have ripple effects outward across multiple systems. And Project 40 is something that came out of questions like that. Project 40 asks us all to imagine what a regional economy in North Carolina might look like if it was built around local food systems and built around a real understanding of urban-rural mutual dependence. Project 40 proposes at its core that by the year 2040, and thank you for kind of teeing this up, Anupama, with the 20 by 20 plan. Project 40 proposes that by the year 2040, the Triangle sources 40% of its food from the region. We're still working on the regional boundary, whether that's 10 or 20 counties, we're not quite sure yet. But 40% is a lot for the whole population of the Triangle. Currently, we're closer to 1%. And so going from 1% to 40% is a big jump. All of our initial research says that it's totally doable. The land is absolutely there. There's millions of acres of farmland in North Carolina. The market is there. The Triangle will be 2.25 million people spending upwards of $6 billion on food every year by the year 2040. The food system expertise is there. The farming knowledge is there. It will take a lot of work. It'll take a lot of coordinated effort. There are also lots of initiatives and organizations that are working on this already, but not in name and not in a coordinated fashion. So the timing is right for it. We've pulled together a really diverse steering committee of experts, rural and urban experts, and we've decided that the way forward is to develop a regional economic development plan that really starts to lay out the first 3 to 5 years of coordinated action, policies, partnerships, investments, so that decision makers, elected officials, funders can make smart, coordinated decisions that leads us all to a place of greater connection and greater prosperity. So we're working on the regional plan now, and really it's about building an understanding of how channels to move more of that $6 billion, directly and indirectly, the multiplier effect is going to be important too, to rural communities and to farm communities and to farms, so that hopefully through things like Project 40, we can change the conversation to what do we lose when we lose a farm, instead to what do we gain? Resilience, land use, community fabric, social capital, economic development. What do we gain? What do all of us gain when we save a farm? Thank you.
The Center for Education in Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math at the University of North Carolina at Wilmington, Carmen Sidbury.
My grandfather, with his third grade education, often inspired me by saying, get something in your head and nobody can take that away from you. So I got all the education I could get. I got a bachelor's degree, master's degree, and even a PhD in mechanical engineering. And in 1995, I became the first African-American woman to get a PhD in mechanical engineering from Georgia Tech University. And so, it's been a journey for me, this whole education thing. I've benefited from teachers, great teachers, that really inspired me. And so, although I was able to accomplish those things, it wasn't easy. See, despite my youthful appearance, I entered first grade in 1968. It was a time right after Dr. Martin Luther King's assassination, and a time when North Carolina schools were still struggling with desegregation. For me, in my younger years, I leaned on the fact that my twin brother could be my voice. Together we were a perfect package, I thought. I was the thinker, and he was the talker. Yes. I could tell him anything, and he could and would tell the world. But in 1967, August 1967 to be exact, my whole world was disrupted. My young twin brother was hit by a car returning from the neighborhood store. And so he would live for a couple of days, but ultimately passed away from the injuries from the accident. So I would enter first grade without my Bubba, without my voice. And I will say, yes, it was a tough time. For me, a very sad period that often showed up on the playground as anger and isolation in my newly integrated school, Dixon. But, at that time, it was a tough it was tough to be a black child during that period. But I persevered. And so for me, though, in 5th grade, everything changed for me. My teacher, Miss Robertson, came to take over our class, and she was a new teacher, a native of Robeson County. And she just had this joy for life that actually inspired us as kids in the class to have a joy for learning. And so, despite the fact that most of the students in my class, we were, by all socioeconomic indicators, from poor families. However, for us, economically poor was never a proxy for low aspirations or even low achievement. And so, for me, it's been an honor, and I'm quite grateful that I got my start in North Carolina schools. I benefited from the compassion of my teachers and from a community that poured their hopes and dreams into me. I got my introduction, actually, to engineering and STEM in general by my physics teacher, Mr. George Foy, who recommended to my parents a pre-college program that was actually at Clemson University. It's very similar to summer ventures in math and science that we offer at many of our UNC system campuses. And it was life-changing for me and really sparked my interest in engineering. So I am the product of an ecosystem that has been very instrumental for me in both my personal and professional journey. So it's an honor for me to share with you our project, STEM SENC, which has an overarching goal to really provide access to STEM learning opportunities for all students, regardless of where they start, their geographical isolation, socioeconomic status, their culture, and even their ability. So we believe that urban youth and rural youth should be provided with opportunities to explore the full range of possibilities that are 21st century career options, and that an education can afford them. And so I'm really excited about the work that we will do through STEM SENC. And I really want to thank my colleagues at UNCW, Dr. Sue Kazios and Dean Van Dempsey, who had the vision to launch this STEM SENC. And more importantly for me, they chose me to be on their team. So for me, a graduate of Dixon High School, which is in Onslow County, this decision to return to North Carolina is like the pinnacle of my career. And I hope to be an aspiration and inspire future students, future generations who start their education in North Carolina schools. So if not me, who? If not when, it's now. So thank you for your time.